Welcome to The Debate. Imagine it is the year 2030. A massive multinational corporation files, well, exactly 0 manual tax returns.
0, right?
0. Every invoice, every cross-border shipment, every complex reconciliation is just cleared in milliseconds by autonomous AI agents. But getting to that reality requires tearing down the very foundation of enterprise finance as we know it. Today, we're talking about SAP Rise, the massive migration to SAP S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition, and specifically the absolute mandate of the clean core.
Right, and if you are listening to this right now, you have probably sat in one of those RISE migration workshops where they enthusiastically told you the core must be clean.
Oh, definitely.
What they did not explicitly tell you is the sheer amount of architectural plumbing you are now personally responsible for building.
And that is exactly the tension we are exploring today, drawing from a recent architectural analysis on the SAP cloud ecosystem. Because SAP's cloud ecosystem enforces the complete removal of custom tax and compliance logic from the ERP core. It shifts all of it out to the SAP Business Technology Platform, what we call BTP, and to external systems.
Right.
I look at this enforced decoupling, and, I represent the view that I see a necessary strategic leap. It stops companies from treating their ERP like a custom compliance engine, and it transforms regulatory reporting from a backwards-looking burden into real-time, event-driven intelligence.
And I look at that exact same architecture representing the contrasting view, and I see a vendor-driven technical constraint that's, masquerading as an enterprise upgrade. SAP is essentially evicting your critical tax logic from the ERP without giving you a comprehensive global replacement out of the box.
I mean, they give you the tools.
But it fractures your enterprise system into a highly complex, fragile web of external orchestrations and mandatory third-party dependencies.
Well, let's actually ground this in the reality of S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition. Because if you are moving to a true multi-tenant SaaS environment, Clean Core is no longer a friendly recommendation or like an architectural philosophy.
No, it's enforced.
Right. It is a hard-coded technical constraint enforced by the platform itself.
It absolutely is. The old habit of opening up the core code to make your life easier is completely locked down.
Exactly. In the legacy on-premise world, if you had a weird local tax rule, say a specific municipal tax in a Brazilian state, your developers would just write custom ABAP code.
Yeah, the classic Z programs.
The Z programs, exactly. They would build those to force the ERP to calculate it directly on the sales order. Now, you do not have ABAP development access. You cannot create custom tables in the core. The days of embedding country-specific compliance logic inside the ERP are just over. And honestly, this is the architectural clarification we have needed for decades. It definitively answers the question of where tax logic should live. Outside.
Outside, yes. But where exactly?
By moving everything to SAP BTP, using standard APIs, the SAP Integration Suite, and Event Mesh, organizations are forced to create a canonical data foundation.
Right.
This decoupling insulates your core system. It allows you to update your compliance rules at the speed of changing global regulations, rather than, waiting for SAP to push a quarterly update.
I mean, that sounds fantastic on a whiteboard. But when you dive into what RISE with SAP actually is, the limitations become glaring. RISE is a managed hosting and transformation package. It is not a complete global compliance architecture.
But SAP does provide native compliance tools. I mean, they have the Document and Reporting Compliance Service, DRC, which sits right there on BTP.
They do, but DRC inherits the exact same limitations of legacy SAP native compliance approaches. First off, it is tied to SAP's release cadence, not the effective dates of actual government regulations.
Okay, but...
And second, it is built entirely around a document-centric philosophy. It is optimized for taking a record and submitting a form, not for generating continuous real-time financial intelligence. So SAP is effectively telling enterprises, get your tax logic out of our core system, while simultaneously failing to provide a production-ready global platform that covers the, 150-plus jurisdictions a typical multinational operates in.
Instead, you are forced to build a precarious multi-layered bridge between S/4HANA, BTP, and third-party systems just to meet the basic legal requirement to issue an invoice.
Okay, let's talk about the mechanics of that bridge, though, because getting the raw data out of the ERP and into that compliance layer is where the real innovation is happening. Specifically, I want to look at SAP Event Mesh.
Which is BTP's event streaming service. Right. To really grasp this shift, think of it like upgrading from a daily postal delivery to an instant neurological response. In the old on-premises world, we relied heavily on batch processing. You would pile up transactions all day and run a massive data extraction job at midnight.
Or wait until the end of the month, causing absolute chaos for the finance team who suddenly had to reconcile 30 days of errors.
Exactly. It was a nightmare. But with an architecture built on BTP Event Mesh, the entire flow is event-driven. The literal millisecond a sales order posts in S/4HANA, a business event is published asynchronously to the mesh.
And that word, asynchronously, is critical there. It means S/4HANA drops the message and moves on. It does not pause to wait for the compliance engine to reply.
It doesn't delay the ERP transaction by a single microsecond. It fires off the notification in real time. The compliance platform, which is subscribed to that specific type of event, pulls the data, processes the validation, and publishes the result right back to the mesh.
Right.
This eliminates the massive latency that has held enterprise finance back for years.
Look, I agree that the messaging speed of Event Mesh is incredibly impressive, but we have to look at what actually happens when that raw transaction data leaves the ERP and hits Layer 2, the compliance orchestration layer. Event Mesh moves the data, sure, but SAP Integration Suite is the middleware actually managing those data flows. It acts as the canonical data bridge.
Which is a huge structural benefit. You extract standard transactional data, normalize it in the integration suite, and strip away all the S/4HANA internal idiosyncrasies. You map it to a universal standard, creating one single version of the truth.
In theory, yes, but in practice you run face first into what I call the pre-formatted trap.
I know the material touches on this concept, but break down exactly how this trap springs on an integration team in the real world.
It comes down to human nature and the pressure of implementation timelines. Imagine a company shipping industrial parts from a manufacturing plant in Germany to a storage warehouse in Poland, but the ultimate buyer who receives the invoice is a customer in France.
Okay, a classic, complex cross-border triangulation.
Exactly. Inside S/4HANA, dealing with the VAT tags and logic for that specific scenario is incredibly nuanced. Now, your canonical data model is supposed to just standardize that raw data, but organizations get tempted. They look at the SAP Integration Suite, iFlows, the actual integration flows, and they think, hey, we have this powerful middleware right here. Instead of just standardizing the data, let's write a script in the middleware to transform it directly into Italy's specific XML format or Poland's KSEF format.
So they start embedding tax rules into the data bridge itself?
Exactly. They replicate their legacy on-premise bad habits using shiny new cloud technology. They turn a pure data bridge into a custom tax engine. Achieving a true one version of truth, stripping out S/4HANA's quirks without accidentally breaking the semantic integrity of a complex cross-border transaction is a massive, highly underestimated operational hurdle.
I hear you, but you are describing a failure of implementation, not a failure of the architecture itself. The entire point of the clean core discipline is that Integration Suite only standardizes data.
But people don't do that.
Because they need discipline. It enforces field definitions, it makes sure a date is formatted as a date, and a currency is standardized. It then hands that clean canonical stream over to an external platform, purpose-built for compliance. Why would an enterprise architect willingly choose to embed country-specific tax rules into their middleware when the architecture explicitly separates those functions?
Because they panic when they realize the massive functional gap SAP left them.
What gap?
The global ecosystem limitation. Let's trace that exact data flow you just outlined. The transaction leaves S/4HANA, it successfully gets normalized by Integration Suite, assuming they avoided my pre-formatted trap. And then, where does it go?
To the compliance platform.
Right. But the source material is completely transparent about this.
SAP BTP does not provide a production-ready global compliance engine covering 150 jurisdictions with pre-built continuous transaction controls, or CTCs, right out of the box.
You mean real-time e-invoicing clearance?
Yes, if you want to legally issue an invoice under Italy's Fattura schema or comply with Poland's KCF system, you have to rely on an external Layer 3 compliance platform. This introduces permanent third-party dependencies into your core financial operations. You are shifting the heaviest lifting of global compliance completely outside your RISE contract.
I actually see that as the defining architectural feature, not a limitation. It is a deliberate, highly effective division of labor.
How is that a feature?
BTP handles what it is best at, which is data orchestration, event streaming, and analytics. A purpose-built external tax engine handles what it is best at, which is relentlessly tracking and updating regulatory content. Think about what happened in the old monolithic fortress model when a new e-invoicing mandate dropped in a country.
You launched a massive ERP customization project that took 6 months.
A 6-month nightmare project. You had to crack open the core code, write custom logic, run extensive regression testing, and, pray that adding a new tax rule in Brazil didn't somehow break your revenue recognition process in Japan.
Fair enough.
In this decoupled architecture, when a new jurisdiction activates a mandate, it becomes a simple configuration exercise in your external platform. You just verify the event routing from the event mesh, and you are live.
Calling it a simple configuration exercise drastically understates the reality of keeping an external regulatory engine perfectly synchronized with your internal canonical data model.
But look at the operational protection it offers. Because the compliance logic lives externally, schema changes happen at regulatory speed. You are completely shielded from S/4HANA's quarterly update schedule. If SAP pushes a massive public cloud update, it poses zero compliance regression risk, because your compliance logic isn't in S/4HANA anymore.
Here's my issue with that. You are assuming that a highly fragmented, multi-vendor architecture is somehow inherently less risky than a unified system. You are taking a single, absolutely critical business process, clearing an invoice so you can legally recognize revenue, and you are fracturing it across S/4HANA, the integration suite, the event mesh, and an external third-party tax engine.
It's componentized, not fractured.
Operationally, to the IT team managing it, it feels fractured. If S/4HANA slightly updates its internal data structures during a quarterly release, your canonical normalization in the middleware has to perfectly catch and translate that change.
Well, yes.
If it misses one field, your external tax engine will fail the authority submission. The burden of orchestrating this entire precarious, multi-layered bridge rests squarely on the enterprise.
Okay. Let's actually look at what you get when you successfully build that bridge, because clearing an invoice is just the foundational layer. The ultimate goal of this decoupled architecture is what the analysis calls the agentic finance stack.
Ah, the Internet of Agents.
Yes, and it is not a whiteboard pipe dream. It is a deployable reality right now. Once you have standardized transactional data flowing continuously through Integration Suite into HANA Cloud, which serves as your pristine canonical foundation, you unlock SAP AI Core. You can deploy autonomous AI agents directly into your financial operations.
But AI needs data, massive amounts of it. Are we just dumping the entire S/4HANA database into an AI model? Because the security implications of that are terrifying.
No. And that is the brilliance of what we call the layer 4 exclusivity principle. The strict rule is that no AI system ever accesses raw ERP data directly. Instead, they use HANA Cloud Federation, which is a zero-copy architecture.
Meaning no physical data movement.
Exactly. Let me explain why that matters so much. Historically, if you wanted to run advanced analytics, you had to physically copy millions of rows of transaction data into a separate database or a data lake.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Right. That copying creates latency, it drives up storage costs, and it degrades semantic integrity because the data is outdated the second it finishes copying. A zero-copy architecture means the AI models read the live data directly in memory. It's like the AI is looking through a perfectly clear window at the live ledger, rather than asking someone to make a photocopy of a ledger that might already be changing.
Okay, so the AI is looking through the window at the S/4HANA data. What are these agents actually doing in this theoretical finance stack?
Think about S/4HANA's Universal Journal. It already unified finance and controlling into a single ledger architecture. Every transaction generates a universal journal entry. When that data flows continuously to HANA Cloud, specialized AI agents take over. You have a transaction validation agent that spots posting anomalies in milliseconds.
Okay,
You have a VAT cash flow agent that constantly monitors your global tax exposure. It can autonomously identify recovery opportunities, like crawling through cross-border employee expenses and realizing you haven't claimed perfectly legal VAT refunds across different European entities.
And they just execute this autonomously?
Yes, along with an R2R, record-to-report intelligence agent that handles millions of lines of reconciliation matching. They operate 24/7. It completely replaces the traditional month-end sprint where accountants lock themselves in a room to reconcile 30 days of ignored data. It becomes a true continuous close. Your financial position is just accurate, real-time, always.
Maintained in real time by autonomous agents. I mean, that phrase alone should send a shiver down the spine of any CFO listening.
Why?
Let's actually look at how you govern this. You are describing an air traffic control system where every single plane is being flown by a different vendor's autopilot. It is a highly distributed ecosystem operating on event mesh. Each agent subscribes to events, processes them autonomously, and publishes outputs that trigger other downstream agents to act.
But it is fully auditable. BTP gives you cryptographic verifiability. Every single action is logged on an immutable ledger. Every automated posting carries the specific identity of the AI agent and the exact canonical data input that triggered its decision. You have complete granular traceability.
I will push back heavily on that, because traceability is not the same thing as reliability.
How so?
Cryptographic logs just tell me exactly who made the catastrophic error and how fast they made it. If your canonical data model fails to perfectly normalize the data upstream, let's say an iFlow drops a critical currency conversion flag, your VHA cash flow agent receives flawed input. It autonomously executes a flawed tax recovery. The fact that I have a pristine, cryptographically secure log of that AI making a mistake does not stop the tax authority from auditing me or issuing a massive financial penalty.
Which is precisely why you establish strict escalation thresholds. The R2R intelligence agent isn't running wild. It flags any exceptions that fall outside its highly specific confidence parameters and instantly routes them to human exception handlers. And you have the CFO cockpit, built in SAP Analytics Cloud, sitting directly on top of HANA Cloud to give you a live, multi-jurisdictional dashboard of this entire flow.
But that CFO cockpit is only as reliable as the most fragile link in this massive chain. If the Layer 3 external tax engine drops a status update, or if Event Mesh experiences a microsecond of latency, the CFO is looking at an illusion of real-time intelligence. You are taking the month-end close, which is incredibly painful, yes, but fundamentally relies on human judgment, review, and intuition, and replacing it with a continuous close that completely depends on a perfectly calibrated multi-vendor IT ecosystem. You are asking enterprises to trust their statutory reporting to an internet of agents.
That perspective makes total sense if you only look at the sheer number of moving parts and assume they are all going to break. But you have to consider the compounding returns of actually getting this architecture right. Designing the event-driven integrations, establishing that pristine HANA Cloud data layer, safely deploying AI core. Yes, it demands immense architectural rigor. It forces your IT, finance, and tax teams to finally sit in the same room and agree on data standards. But once it is built,
You just have more software subscriptions and third-party APIs to manage.
no, you drive down the marginal cost of new capability to near zero. When the first new e-invoicing mandate hits after your go-live, you just configure your external platform. No ERP downtime. When you deploy your first AI agent on that canonical foundation, it works reliably because the data is undeniably clean. By the time you deploy your 6th or 7th agent, you are operating a genuinely autonomous finance function. The system scales beautifully. S/4HANA handles the core system of record, BTP handles the data orchestration and intelligence, and your external partner handles the regulatory content updates. Everyone does exactly what they were expertly designed to do.
That is a beautiful, utopian vision of enterprise software. The pragmatic reality is much harsher. Organizations signing RISE contracts today are often entirely unaware of the architectural reckoning waiting for them.
Reckoning is a strong word.
But it's true. They think they are buying a holistic, all-in-one package that will seamlessly lift their existing on-premise operations into the cloud. Instead, they discover that their global e-invoicing capability is explicitly excluded from the clean core. They are going to have to architect layers 2 through 6 themselves, patching together S/4HANA, BTP, Event Mesh, Integration Suite, HANA Cloud, and mandatory third-party tax engines. It is an immense operational burden being stealthily shifted from the vendor to the enterprise under the banner of modernization.
Well, as we bring this debate to a close, I think it's vital to summarize exactly where these architectural decisions leave enterprise leaders today. From my perspective, embracing the enforced clean core and truly mastering the SAP BTP architecture, specifically leveraging Event Mesh for real-time streaming, HANA Cloud for your canonical data foundation, and AI Core for agentic operations, is the only viable path forward. It is the only way to build a continuous financial intelligence platform capable of actually operating in our real-time, heavily mandated global regulatory world.
And my summary remains that this architecture, while undeniably impressive on a whiteboard, forces organizations to externalize their most critical compliance logic into a fragmented ecosystem. It places an immense, arguably unreasonable pressure on internal data models and third-party integrations to fill the massive functional gaps left empty by the RISE package itself.
Yet, despite our profound disagreement on the operational risk profile of this setup, there is a powerful point of convergence here. We both entirely agree that the era of embedded, on-premise tax logic is permanently over. The monolithic fortress has been evacuated.
That is undeniably true. The rigid technical constraints of S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition make it a factual reality, not a theoretical debate. The decisions enterprise architects are making right now in their RISE migration workshops are not just procurement choices about where to host some servers. They are foundational architectural declarations. If you get your canonical data bridge wrong today, you will not have an autonomous finance function in 2030. You will have a multi-vendor integration nightmare.
Precisely. And that highlights the immense value of examining this transition from multiple perspectives. We have to weigh the systemic innovation of real-time event streaming and AI against the severe operational demands of managing a highly distributed chain. There is so much more to explore here in the material, particularly around the governance frameworks needed to safely deploy AI in statutory environments. We leave it to you, the listener, to weigh these architectural trade-offs for your own enterprise.
Because you cannot just move out of the fortress without a very detailed map of how you are going to survive in the open ecosystem.
Exactly. We've torn down the walls of the keep, and now the real work of building a central nervous system begins. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.